United Arab Emirates, and Mikhail Madsen, film director and conceptual artist.
In the Arabian Nights, human life depends on stories being told. Tales, myths, interpretations, suggestions about what life means and perhaps also meant. Sadly, as we all know and why we are gathered here today in New Dubai, on our new planet, all these tales were lost, along with the old planet, the planet we called Earth. Behind me, in a loop, we see the only remaining images of what was called terrestrial life. What we see is the most fundamental, which became lost. We see humans not worrying, not being afraid about the heat, the fires, the floods of migration. Before someone said, "My fear is our lack of imagination." You and I cannot imagine the extinction of humanity. And that's why life on Earth is already lost. How much, besides the ability to tell tales which could truly understand our situation, was lost with Earth? Today, on our new planet, we don't really know anymore, but probably not much. Not when we look around here, in the new Dubai, in this great museum of the past. The Museum of the Past, built to commemorate a true act of political imagination. Political imagination which turned the tides on Earth. It was frightening, but it showed that the situation was understood, that the future was more important than the present. The truth was that only by facing what our ancestors feared the most, namely that their world would become uninhabitable, only by realizing that they had to prepare for the worst eventuality, also hope was created. That was their act of political imagination. Our ancestors came up with the following simple idea, and it was for free. They sanctified a space orbit around Earth. they mandated a United Nations UNESCO World Heritage orbit, securing at least the possibility of a future lifeboat mission away from Earth. They sanctified and put to the sky the myriads of existential questions that everybody could feel, but no one could answer. Yet they understood that these questions, for the first time in the history of humanity, were questions for humanity as a whole. They called it the UNESCO New Beginning Orbit. They knew that any mission away from Earth for reaching another habitable planet had to use a generation ship, and such, due to its scale, could only be built in an orbit around Earth. They knew that already then such an orbit had to be kept clear, designated sacred, in the name of the future for humanity, devoid of national or private interests and the resulting space junk. It was the creation of both a symbol and something real. At its heart was the question, what does it mean to truly begin anew? And the reason to bear children returned, and children were born again. We all know today in the new Dubai of the many firsts it took when our ancestors, when they eventually had to build their generation ship, their space cathedral, the old world's unifying project. In that sanctified orbit, and the few, admittedly, leaving Earth, eventually on the 1001 generation travel, sacrificing themselves in finding our new planet in the universal night. It was political navigation. It was political imagination. Because it was a new tale. What we lost with the Arabian Nights, we regained. Here in the New Dubai, in the Museum of the Past, we will now, for educational purposes, try to reconstruct the historical discussions back on our lost planet when that proposal was first suggested, which was on something called Dubai Future Forum in its third edition, really the only one worth remembering because it carried on for hundreds of years, but that's how long it took to space to build a generation ship, which, well, eventually brought us here. I believe that somewhere in this museum there is a model that vaguely resembles our craft. To aid the reconstruction and the many philosophical and ethical questions, His Excellency Omran Sharaf will join us, because we must remember the strong warning that the many opponents to the UNESCO New Beginning orbit put forward. Do not replicate what you try to replace. Nor must we forget ever our realization the 1001 generation travel brought here and taught us. To the universe, we humans mean nothing. happen to have it is a reproduction, but this is the historical document that back on the Lost Planet outlined the very first time the suggestion of a UNESCO New Beginning orbit was ever put forward in that memorable third edition of Dubai Future Forum. It's an interesting document. Among the many things described, it talks about a new first for humanity in actually facing this possible extinction that they feared, and how new tales were needed to be told. That was the impetus, I believe, behind the writer who initially proposed this idea. A world citizen, this person considered himself.
So the question is?
I think the question is if we today, who've come ashore on a new shore, if we truly understand the problems that existed back on Earth, how it was truly possible for these people to overcome their greatest obstacle, namely to understand the situation and learn from the discussions that were back then, because some people, they said, that whole idea about escaping Earth is just an act of cowardice. Others, they said, this is not a moral question, all life just wants is to survive. Some people, especially the scientists at that time, of course, they saw the opportunity of combining all efforts in terms of using the moon, the Mars, and all those aspects as stepping stones for something that could truly unite the world back then.
So, the universe that we live in, I believe, is an evolving universe, which includes the galaxies and the planets and our planet Earth that we live in. So as human beings, we need to understand that we live in an evolving world, whether it's our planet, whether us as human beings, that we are actually changing, that the planet is changing, and the universe is changing. Planet Earth is always going to be our organic planet. Planet Earth is always going to be our home planet. We as humans, when we go and explore other planets, we as humans, when we send missions to outer space and set the assets that exist, it's about saving our planet, it's about better understanding the changes that's happening, and it's about preserving life on Earth. Whatever we're doing today and whatever we did in the past and whatever we'll do in the future, it's about living on planet Earth and going back to our organic, natural planet. There are different elements that we have to take into account when it comes to outer space exploration. When we talk about sending missions and humans to faraway planets to set a base, a foundation there, whether it's about preserving the resources that we have on Earth, or about being able to gain more resources to maintain the life on Earth and make sure that we always stay on our organic planet. It's about food security. It's about water security. It's about energy security. It's about the sustainable development and high quality of life for citizens of planet Earth. So no matter what we do today or in the future, again, it's about maintaining this planet and being on it as humans. There are talks about abandoning our planet. There are talks about moving away from it. There are talks about finding alternatives. But is that a permanent solution? I don't know. Is that a sustainable solution? I don't know. What I know is this is our home planet.
This was an example of a perfect recreation of some of the discussions and the valid discussions back on Earth. There was also attempts to try to look at historical analogies, like we partly did here. There were talks about a ship named Titanic and the experience of human dignity, because at that historical ship hit an iceberg. It was thought to be unsinkable. And as the ship listed to the side and people gathered on the deck, the orchestra came to play. That was a sign of human dignity. It was also a sign of human dignity when the passengers started to look around for the lifeboats. And although there were not enough lifeboats, at least women and children could go first. That analogy, in terms of the situation back on Earth, ends right there, because as our ancestors looked around for a lifeboat, there were none. It really questioned the question about who we humans are, because we could no longer act as we are used to think about ourselves, namely to be in control. In a way, for our ancestors, it was like coming full circle as nature increasingly ran out of control. We had to understand that there are forces that are perhaps greater than us humans. So what we learn from the planets, perhaps, that we are not, or the sun, or anything is at the center of the universe, is maybe something that we had to learn that time in a new way. Of course, there were volunteers for the mission. Many people wanted to get away, many people wanted to stay. But how many truly understand what it would mean to go away from Earth? One of the greatest fears was, as we also just encountered now, was the fear, can we actually leave Earth and still remain human? Of course, we know the answer today here in the Museum of the Past, but it was a real anxiety. Can we humans truly leave Earth and remain what we were? Of course, today, we can think about whether leaving everything behind was a relief, was not a loss, but a freedom. I'd like to quote some of the last sentences from our ancestor. It's called an epilogue. It says, "It's not unlikely that in time, many generations after today, what began with the UNESCO New Beginning orbit will have split humanity into two or more." That was the discussion about colonization, for example, or going to Mars. It's already there. It is possible that those who leave will never be able to come back, or if they do, it will be at a time when all knowledge of each other has been lost and we meet in destruction. In short, could have spared the journey. It is possible, if not likely, that eventually my time of writing this will be called the old age. Yes, This may happen anyway. This is the extent of how I foresee the climate crisis will change and surpass anything we can imagine. Therefore, the UNESCO New Beginning Orbit must be formulated today. There will be no greater travel for humanity, no greater leap, no other way of altering our imagination. That was the fear permeating this document. The fear about not actually being able to understand where we are. Do you have any questions to our historical document here?
I do. How do we manage governing these activities that's taking place in space? How did we reach the point that we are today when it comes to being responsible nations in exploring new frontiers in outer space? How did we make sure that we did not pollute the orbits around Earth? How did we make sure that we did not weaponize space, to put weapons in space and destruct assets on Earth and around space using those technologies? Was there a discussion for that taking place? Was there forums for these discussions? What are the rules and the laws that govern these activities? So these are the questions that we speak about every day, we discuss on a daily basis. Space is not just about outer space exploration. Space is about quality of life. A lot of us sitting here today don't understand how integrated our life is with different systems and assets in space, whether it's communication, whether it's navigation, whether even it's managing disasters around the world. Policymakers make strategic decisions based on information provided by space assets. Whether it's environmental decisions or geopolitical decisions. So even though space seems to be something very far away and it's more about science, but it's not just about science, it's about quality of life. And it's a driver for human development and economic development. For every dollar that was spent in outer space activities in the US, some studies have indicated that the return on that investment was $7 per $1 invested on the US economy. That's just from the economic point of view. So when we look at the space and approach it from a strategic point of view, we cannot just look at it as outer space and understanding other planets. It needs to be something that serves us as humanities. It's about improving the quality of life. It's about accelerating and better informing decision makers and the decisions that are being taken place. And if we are not able to sit together and discuss some of the pressing topics, then we won't be able to move forward with these discussions. Every day, more and more nations are joining the space efforts globally. The number of emerging space nations has significantly grown. The countries who were not able to put systems in space are able to now to come up with those initiatives. We have non-state actors who actually own space assets, which in the past was only controlled, governed, and produced by governments. So how do we manage this? How do we make sure that non-state actors or individuals control global politics, global economy, and the global social, political ecosystem? It's not an easy question to answer. But these are questions that need to be addressed. These are questions that need to be answered, needs to be debated. The old treaties that we have in place, they've worked at a certain point. But more needs to come to govern these activities and to help us as humans move forward.
It says in this document that the impetus for this world citizen to create the proposal of UNESCO New Beginning Orbit, that this person was invited back on Earth into similar discussions as has been described here, into the question about why go to space from the year 2040 and forward. This person, he tried to say that, yes, there may be economical gains, scientific exploration, there may be many things needed for the future, but perhaps space first and foremost represents something else. The chance to create a new perspective. He was thinking about the International Space Station and its ability to overcome strife on Earth, for example, and have collaboration. And perhaps this person was thinking about that to put into the sky fundamental questions for the future and to realizing that they are there, that might be the new perspective that could help the future to see a future and to create a future. That's some of the parts also in this historical document. I also know, but the evidence is scant, it's so long time ago, that this person was interested in other people who might share this person's interest. Just as mentioned before, he was looking for volunteers to actually crew such a ship, as understanding what this would really mean was really the task for everyone. Is there anything more you would like to add now that we are sitting in the future and we can take the liberty to reflect a little bit on the past, especially when so much of the past is really lost? We have to assume some things, or we can do some interpretations.
Well, my last message to all of you is, as I said earlier, planet Earth is our organic planet. We should always put our efforts, resources, and minds into saving this planet and to make sure the future generation stay and live on this planet. And whatever we do is about staying here and not running away and going to a different planet.
Yes, and this was actually a very important starting point, because as the generation ship left Earth 1,001 generation ago, there were in fact no planet found yet, no habitable planet. So when they left, they didn't know where to go. A journey without destination. However, that might have been the human destiny all along. Thank you very much.
Thank you.